Lesson 3-3, Solving Quadratic Equations. To solve a quadratic equation simply means to determine the roots, the zeros, the solutions, or the x-intercepts. These all mean the same thing. In this quadratic, we see that the roots are -4 and +2. Therefore, if we plugged in -4 and worked it out, we would get a true statement of 0 equals 0. Let's test this out. So we're going to plug in -4, and we're going to square it. We're going to plug in -4 for this x, -8 equals 0. I'm going to work this out. 16 minus 8 equals 0. When I do the math on the left, I get 0 equals 0. If I plug in +2 here, everywhere for an x, because that's my second root or solution, that's going to give me 4 plus 4 minus 8 equals 0, and indeed we get another true statement. So just keep in mind that when you're solving a quadratic, you are finding the points of where they cross the x-axis, if they cross at all. Here are some strategies for solving quadratics. Solve by factoring, square root method, completing the square, using the quadratic formula, and graphing. Today we will focus on factoring and square root method. Solve by factoring. You can factor out the greatest common factor, use snappy factors by grouping, or the magic X. Let's do one of each. In this first case, we can see that we have an 8x that can factor out of both terms, leaving us with x plus 2 equals 0. I set each of these equal to 0 and solve them. On the left side, I will divide by 8, and one of my zeros is 0, and the other solution is going to be -2 because I subtract 2 from both sides. In the second example, we can see that we can do snappy factors, and so we're going to create our two expressions. We factor x squared into x and x, and then we're looking for two factors of -21 that add up to give us 4. That is going to be +7 and -3. So we have x plus 7 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0. We solve, and our two roots are -7 and +3. Here we have a polynomial, and we are going to use the grouping method. So we group two terms together, and we can factor out a x squared in this first one, leaving us with x plus 7. We're going to factor out a -2 in the second one, and that leaves us with x plus 7 equals 0. If you have trouble with knowing how to factor out a negative, I can just check myself and distribute the -2 to each term to make sure I get back exactly what I started with. Now we're going to put together the things that were factored out, which was x squared. Let's make this -2 here. And then we're going to make an expression with a thing that we had in common. Both of these had x plus 7. We set equal to 0. We are now going to solve each of these. This is going to end up giving us 3 roots. So this is not just a parabola. We can just say it's a polynomial, and it will cross more than twice. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. I'm going to take the square root, and when we take the square root, we are going to have a positive and negative. So 2 of the solutions are a positive and a negative square root of 2. Over here, we're simply going to subtract 7, so our third root is -7. On this one, we're going to do the magic X, and we use magic X especially when we have a number for a that's not 1. So we're going to multiply the a times the c to give us 12, and then we write down our b on the bottom. So what two factors of 12 add up to give to -13? That is going to be a -12 and a -1. Now we take our a and place it on the bottom of each of these, and we simplify. So this -12/3 simplifies to 1, and then we have -4. So this and this fraction really create our two expressions. So we're going to have 1x minus the 4, and then 3x minus 1. Set each of those to 0. And solve. On this one, we simply add 4. On this one, we're going to add 1. And then we're going to divide by 3. So we can just leave it as 1/3. Our two solutions are 4 and 1/3. Now, let's talk about solve by square root. So let's just go through several examples. Here, we're trying to find what w can be to equal 121. So to undo something that's been squared, we take the square root, and remember we're going to use positive and negative. So our two solutions are positive 11 and negative 11. Here we need to subtract 8 first. And we have c squared equals 36. Taking the square root, remembering to use our plus or negative, and our two roots are positive and negative 6. Those were a little simple. Number 3, you can see here we're going to have to add 5 first to both sides, gives us 75, and then we will divide each side by 3, and that leaves us with k squared equals 25. Take the square root of both sides, so we get a positive and negative 5 as the solutions. Okay, here's something different. Notice that the 2x plus 4 is being squared. I can't add or divide. So to get rid of the square, I take the square root of this entire expression. So I'm going to take the square root of the other side as well. So now I have 2v plus 4 equals positive and negative 14. So we have to set this 2v plus 4 equal to positive 14 and 2v plus 4 equal to negative 14. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. That gives me, we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. That gives me 10. Divide by 2, and one solution is 5. Over here, when I subtract 4 from both sides, I'm going to get a negative 18. Divide both sides by the 2, and I get negative 9. So my two solutions are 5 and negative 9. Okay, these examples are going to include numbers that do not have a perfect square on the right-hand side. So same process, take the square root of both sides, positive and negative. Here we are going to have to simplify the square root of 50. It breaks down into 25 times 2. So that's going to be positive or negative 5 root 2. Number 6, we're going to add 4 to both sides, giving me d squared is equal to 24. Take the square root of both sides. We have positive and negative, the square root of 24. This can factor into 4 times 6, and we have positive and negative 2 root 6. So those are our two roots. 7, we are going to first make that a little bit neater. Subtract 8 from both sides. That gives me 2m squared equals 48, looks like. Divide by the 2. And m squared is equal to 24. We just factored this one. Take the square root, positive and negative. So my two solutions are positive and negative 2 root 6. Okay, let's be very careful on this one. Let me scoot it up just a little bit because we will need the entire page. So we are going to take the square root to undo the squared, positive and negative. We get 4x minus 2 is equal to positive and negative. This breaks down into 4 times 5. So that's going to be positive and negative 2 root 5. So I'm going to have two equations. We probably could just leave it together, but just in case, I'm going to break it apart. Okay, we're going to add 2 to both sides, but look, when I add 2, we cannot add it to this. They are not like terms, so I'm going to kind of put it to the side. Then I have 4x equals 2 square root of 5 plus 2. Make sure the square root symbol does not get extended over the plus 2. Divide everything by 4. And I'm just going to break it apart into x equals 2/4 gives me 1/2. So that is square root of 5 over 2. The understood 1 is right here. This is going to be plus 2/4 is 1/2. And I do believe once we work this out, it'll be the same thing, but we'll end up with a negative 2/5. So here I'm just going to make it positive and negative. Square root of 5 over 2 plus 1/2, and those are our 2 roots. 2 more and we will be done. We're going to add 2. That gives me 3g squared equals 60. I'm going to divide by the 3. I'm going to get g squared equals to 20. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, positive and negative. That gives me g is equal to positive and negative 2 root 5. I'm going to scoot this problem up because I think we need a little bit more room. Okay, so we are going to take the square root of both sides, positive and negative, so that leaves me with 3x plus 6 equals positive and negative. This breaks down into 9 and 5, so I'm going to have 3 root 5. We are going to subtract 6. Since I really can't combine these, that's why I can leave it together, so I'm not going to be combining this with a positive 3 and then again with a negative 3. So that's why I can do this all together. Bring down 3x. I have plus or minus 3 square root of 5 minus 6. Again, be careful, don't extend your radical over the minus 6. Divide everything by 3. And x equals positive and negative. 3 into 3 gives me a 1, so I have the square root of 5, and 3 divided into negative 6 is negative 2, and there we have it.